Hello, everyone. This is Marc Sabatella from Outside Shore Music, home of mastering MuseScore. Welcome to the MuseScore Café. This is our regular Wednesday series. We talk about some aspect of creating music using MuseScore. Talk about some particular feature area or some particular use case and explore it. Excuse me. And this being the third Wednesday of the month, what we are doing here is what I call the score of the month, where I just take a particular score and enter it into MuseScore and see what happens. That's what we do here. So I've got a Bach piece kind of queued up that we're going to be looking at, and it's not one that a lot of people necessarily know, and so it's going to be kind of fun to get this in MuseScore. I think it's already been entered before, I'm sure, but we're going to be doing it ourselves. And by the way, I see that there's some questions that don't seem to... Heis, you've got a question about something. You might want to post that in the community, and I'll take a look at it later. But happy to do so. All right, and Colleen, great about the Bela Fleck Rhapsody in Blue, and I know that he put out a version of Rhapsody in Blue that is like a whole other arrangement, I believe. I haven't heard it yet. I'm kind of curious. I'm assuming it's not like a really straight-on, faithful recreation, but it's probably adapted to his style, but I don't know. I haven't heard it yet. All right, so what we're going to be doing is we're going to be looking at this particular prelude here. And this here that we are looking at is a version that I have that I found on IMSLP, which is always a great website to go for classical music, public domain classical music, because it's got tons of stuff. It's been around for decades. Well, I actually don't know how long, but a long time. And people have uploaded all sorts of scores that they've scanned. And it's very well organized. The search features are really nice in it. And they usually have multiple editions, and they tell you who the editor was for each one, what year it came out. They give you all sorts of really, really useful information about the piece. And so, yeah, I'm curious, Colleen. So it's one with orchestra. So is it like the original orchestra accompaniment, and he's basically playing a version of the piano part, or do they give part of the piano part to people in the orchestra? I'm just kind of curious, and I could listen myself and eventually figure that out. But would love to hear your take on what you're hearing. All right, so what we are looking at here is what is called an urtext edition, meaning it is as faithful as possible to Bach's original, like his original handwriting just translated into the notation. And you have to realize that most editions are not that. Most editions that one might find are not urtext. They're going to have all sorts of things added by editors, like dynamic markings and phrasing markings and all sorts of things that an editor thought, fingerings and whatnot, that some editor thought might be useful. In fact, I should have brought up just a couple other versions to look at. So I'm just going to go IMSLP. BWV is, it's German something. That's how Bach's works are catalyzed, by BWV number. And so as you see here, there is all these different scores available here for this piece, and it was part of a collection. So it was published as a collection of 9, also published as a collection of 12, all sorts of stuff. You can read up about it. But I'm looking at this one that says urtext. If we look at one of the ones that say not an urtext version, we look at this version here, we're going to see that there's look at that, slur markings here that were not in the original, this einfach und ruhig bewegt. I should know what that means, but I don't. He's got dolce written in, fingering, slur markings, all sorts of stuff that Bach didn't write in there. Some editor wrote that stuff in. The original, in Bach's handwriting originally, because that is available also, is much cleaner. It doesn't have all those details. Now, it does have those ornaments written in, but you'll notice the urtext version have places where he's written in a suggested interpretation of that ornament. The version that I originally saw this in has a different interpretation of that same ornament written in. This little guy here, this little mordant there, is in there, but you'll see it just says ba-da-dum. It's got the mordant there, but it doesn't have the accidental written in there. That was an editorial decision to say, oops, that he wants it to be played with an F sharp. Come on. With a little F sharp in there. So all sorts of details like this are added by editors later. To make it more performable to the average musician who might not know how to do all this stuff for themselves. So what I'm going to do is first enter the urtext. I'm going to enter just what Bach wrote as per this edition here. I'm not going to try to look at the original handwriting and decipher that because I have a feeling as per this. I think the one change they made is, notice this clef here, Bach used that clef a lot, soprano clef, as opposed to treble clef. Bach wrote in soprano clef a lot, and so probably the actual manuscript in Bach's handwriting had this written in soprano clef, but that is like the one editorial decision that was made for this urtext to say, yeah, we're going to go with Bach's original manuscript, but we're going to at least translate it to modern clefs. That's a pretty common thing to do because otherwise, no one's going to want to read the thing if it's written in some clef that no one knows anymore. So I'm now going to set up my score. So this is a relatively short piece, as you can see. I'll play the beginning of it so you get a sense of it. So that's how it goes. And I'm not playing the little ornaments because I haven't really practiced it. My wife has been practicing this for a while. She sounds great on it, and that's what put it on my radar. Right, that's with the little ornaments. And here's the thing where, the ornament, the mordant with the slash through it versus without the slash through it, different interpretations of whether that means go down, go up. The interpretation has changed over the years. I'm not the expert on that kind of stuff. I am not the expert on interpretation of Baroque ornaments. I rely very heavily on people to sort out for me. This is how I think that ornament should be played based on their more extensive experience with the particular composer, their particular way of using notation and so forth, because it keeps changing. The same mordant symbol can mean a different thing to different composers. So rather than me having to remember that, I like to use editors' suggestions, but I also like to see the original. So let's move back over to MuseScore then, and I'm going to create a new score. So Control-N is, how I'm going to get started. And I'm going to create this using the Grand Staff template. I could come over and use the solo piano template, and it's really the exact same thing as far as I know. I'll go to next and say this is prelude in C. I'm not going to bother with all the information because that's not that interesting. I guess I'll say J.S. Bach because Bach alone isn't sufficiently specific. For the subtitle, I'm going to type a space and delete it so I don't get the word subtitle in my score that I then have to delete. So now I have my score here ready to enter notes. And I didn't think about the time signature or the key signature, but I kind of lucked out. The piece is in C major, and its time signature is listed as common time instead of 4/4. Okay, and that's, how things were generally done. I think like most modern day composers probably use 4/4 instead of C, but more than 100 years ago, C was more common for common time. So whatever, I'll change it to common time. Doesn't phase me a bit. It's not like writing in soprano clef where it ruins my life. This is just a symbol up front. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to put in the first measure of the right hand and then stop because I want you to notice that the rest of the piece for the next 8 bars is identical rhythmically. And I'm going to take advantage of that fact to more quickly enter the rest of the piece once I get that first section in there. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to do this, and people have asked about this, and I wish I could tell you how to do it on Windows, how to do it on Mac OS. I only know how to do it on my Chromebook. It's as simple as hovering over the minimize button here, and you'll see these other things show up, including one that says float. And when you pick the float option, it will continue to display this window even while you're in another window, which is super useful for stuff like what I'm about to be doing here, where I want to enter notes and I still want to see the original score. So I know it's possible to do that on Windows. I know it's possible to do it on Mac OS. I know most Linux systems offer something similar, but I don't know the details of how. Feel free to share that in the chat here so you all can help each other out. All right, I'm going to enter that. I'm going to enter the left hand first because it's so darn easy, right? And if you've never seen note input before, we're not going to get easier than this. I press N for note input mode. And now I'm going to enter the first 4 notes. So I usually use keyboard shortcuts, and so we want to know 4, 5, and 6 are the shortcuts for eighth, quarter, and half. And then, smaller numbers will be shorter values, larger numbers will be greater values. The question about the alto clef, frankly, I'm not going to worry about that. I'm not trying to enter that, but it's there because it's not an alto clef. That's what I said is soprano clef. That's what Bach actually originally wrote. He loved that clef. It looks like alto clef, but the little C is on the bottom line instead of the second line like alto clef would be. Bach, that was what the clef that Bach wrote in, but for this edition, they changed it to treble clef, and I'm going to do the same. So I want to enter, those first 4 notes in the left hand. So 5 is a shortcut for quarter note, and then I can type C. Now I have to actually get my focus back in that window. 5, C, and then an E, and then a G, and then another G, except it's an octave lower, so control down. And let me turn the volume back up. So I now have those first 4 notes in. The thing is, because the left hand is all quarter notes, I'm not sure that I'm going to save any time by copying and pasting the first measure to other measures and then fixing the pitches or anything. I'm not sure that's going to go any more quickly. So I'm just going to enter the first 2 measures here. Next, I want a D, not in that octave, but this octave, so control up, and then F, and then A, and then A an octave lower. Now, the next thing I can decide is, am I going to try to keep to this original formatting where there's 2 measures on the first system, 2 measures on the second system, or am I going to let MuseScore try to fit more measures on the page or not? I probably, if I were presenting this like to publish or to do whatever with, I would want to decide on the line breaks for myself. I wouldn't want MuseScore to decide them for me, nor would I want the urtext, the edition that I'm copying from, to decide them for me. However, while I'm entering the notes, it's extremely useful to have the same line breaks as in the original because it makes it easier to copy. So I'm just going to hit enter right now, and that just puts in a break. So now I have my 2 measures on that first system. All right, so now that I've got that in there, I'm going to hit escape to leave note input mode. I'm going to click, I'm zooming in a little bit here so that it just fills the screen. And, right, Alice, yeah, I misspoke about the clef, of course. Alto is the second line, right. Altos, I'm at the middle line, not the second line. So now I want to get the right-hand notes in. So I'll press N for note input mode. 3 is my shortcut for 16ths. 0 enters the rest. And now I can type the notes. G, C, E, 0, G, whoops. Control Z, G. Wrong octave, so G, C, E, space, G, down an octave, C, D, rest, B, D, G. So notice that as you enter 16th notes, these measures are getting wider. When it looked at first like, hey, I'm gonna get way more than 2 measures on this first system. No, not by the time you fill it with 16ths. I think at most I probably could have gotten 3 measures on that line. So I said that I could use a special trick to kind of copy and paste that measure and then just replace the pitches and not have to replace the rhythms. I'm going to show you that trick in a minute, but I'm going to preface it by saying it's not actually going to be that valuable here because these are all 16th notes. Notice that I never had to press 3 again. Once I pressed 3 at the beginning, I just entered all 16th notes. Yes, I had to press 0 for rests, but I never had to change the duration. So the actual benefit of the thing I'm about to show you is less. Where it really comes in handy is if you have a really complicated rhythm, and then the next measure has the exact same complicated rhythm, but different pitches. And that does happen pretty often. Because this thing I'm going to show you allows you to just enter new pitches while reusing the same rhythm. So I'm going to show you that technique. So what I'm going to do is leave note input mode. I'm going to select that measure. I'm just clicking an empty spot. And now I want to see how many copies I need. I need 1 copy, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 copies. So I'm going to press R 7 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And now I've got, and you can see I can actually fit 3 measures worth of 16ths if I really need to in here. But the original only had 2. In fact, does it only have 2 for the whole score? No, it's got 2 sometimes, 3 sometimes. So it looks like, though, it's got 2 up until the place where that stops, and then it has 3. So I'm just going to enter a couple more line breaks. Select a measure, hit enter. Select a measure, hit enter. And then select this measure and hit enter. So now I've got my breaks in where they belong. So now I want to show you, so I now have exact copies of that first measure. I don't want exact copies, right? I just want same rhythm, different pitches. So what I'm going to do now is switch to repitch mode. I'm long clicking this button. There's also this little arrow down there that is supposed to clue you in. What did I just do? Huh. Did I just do something? I don't know what I did. I'm going to undo. Nope, I don't know what I did. But I felt like I saw something change when I clicked that little arrow. But you're going to long click this thing and it pops up this window that lets you say repitch existing notes. And there's a shortcut for it defined by default, Control-Shift-I. There's not a shortcut defined for the converse command to go back to the default mode. The default note input mode is called step time. That's the one where you pick a duration, enter pitches. Pick a duration, enter pitches. That's called step time, and there's not a shortcut for it by default as far as switching between these modes, but I defined one, Control-Shift-N. So when I use it, I'll show you where it is and how that goes. So repitch. If you want to use your mouse for entering pitches, it is right-clicking enters a rest. So I'm not sure what you mean, Michael, unless you mean that you can right-click that. Oh, right-click that icon. Right-click the icon does pop up the dialog. That's good to know. All right, new information. Great, Michael. All right, so I'm in the default step time mode. Now I want to switch to repitch mode. And so now the icon looks different, right? It has this thing with a note head and arrows. What happens now is it's going to ignore rest and just let me retype pitches. So first I'm just going to hit Control right to move to the next measure. Now all I have to do is retype the pitches. A, down arrow, D, G, and then A, down, Control down that is, D, F, A, Control down, D, E, and then C, E, A. So notice I didn't have to actually type the rests. So that's, moderately better. If you're thinking that all that control up down, because when you have this type of passage where it keeps leaping from octave to octave, you notice how often I had to use control up, control down. That's kind of the one downside of keyboard note input, is it does mean that when lines leap around a lot, you're going to have to use control up, control down a lot. This, I'll make a musical observation. It's not that this line really leaps a lot. Like, let's go back to what I've already just entered. This line right here, A, D, G, A, D, F. You might look at that and say, hey, there were 2 leaps of a fourth, and then a leap of a seventh, and then a leap of a fourth, and then a leap of a third, and say, hey, that thing is all leaps. Well, technically it is, but if we think of this first thing as basically a chord followed by another chord, we see that it's really A remaining A, D remaining D, and G moving by step to the F. The G is held over from the previous chord. It's called a suspension, right? So yes, the way the voice leading works out and the fact that it's arpeggiated means there's a lot of leaps, but voice leading wise, it's really still about steps. So that said, it still means we have to enter the notes one at a time, and that means I'm using control up, control down a lot. So what I might want to do is actually use the mouse to enter some notes, which I don't do very often because I don't find it convenient. But if I just click this B right now, notice it adds it to the chord. It doesn't replace the note because mouse entry is designed to be efficient for that sort of thing. However, if I press Shift while clicking the note, it will replace. And in doing so, it still is honoring all the original rhythms. Now, as I'm doing this, see how long it takes me to get exactly the right spot? It's not saving me time to do that, right? It is just not saving me time. So yeah, by all means, you can use the mouse to enter the notes, and if you shift click, it will replace the notes, and it will save you from having to do control up, control down, or command up, command down on Mac. But ultimately, unless you're just a lot more precise and quick about using the mouse than I am, it's not faster than typing and occasionally using control up, control down. C, E, F, G, down, D, up. And notice I'm just looking at the music here. I'm not looking at what I'm entering. I'm using MuseScore's playback to let me know when the octave was wrong. And you don't have to have perfect pitch. Just notice, did it go up or did it go down, right? If I type a G right now, I'm expecting it to be a lower note than I just heard. I just heard that F up there. If I now type a G, I see, oh, that G is higher than the F I just did. That must not be right. I'm going to press down. I don't have to see it at all. I just go off of what I'm hearing. And now the D, nope, it's supposed to be higher. So E, so I control up, and then E, and then G, control down, C, E, and then A, nope, down, C, D. And so I'm not looking at what I'm doing at all. I'm really just looking at the original there. And then E, control down, B, control up, B, D. So these big wide arpeggios that keep going up and then leaping down again, it's extra work to enter that no matter how you slice it. No matter how you slice it. So yeah. And yeah, it can be, it's just fiddly to try to get your note on the right line or space. And part of the problem is your mouse pointer, you've got the little note picture showing you what note it's supposed to be entering on, but it's really going off of where your mouse pointer is, which notice right now my mouse pointer looks like it's on the line, if you can see it. It's small, but the note that it says is going to enter is on the space. And yeah, who knows where it's really going to be. Yeah. So I've now entered some more notes. Did I get all the way to the end? No, it looks like I never got that final D. So D. That time I was outside of note input mode. And no, I'm still in note input mode, sorry. let's stop with the note input now. I'm going to press, no, I'm not going to press escape yet. Because when I went to repitch mode, it's important to know that repitch mode sticks. So even if I press N to get out of note input mode, notice that even though this icon isn't highlighted anymore, it still is showing the note, the repitch icon. That's telling me that the next time I go to note input mode, I'm still going to be in repitch mode. Well, probably I don't want that anymore. So usually when I'm done with repitch mode, I try to remember to go back to step time. And that is why I've defined a shortcut for it, Control Shift N. That changes the mode from repitch to step time. There's not a default shortcut for that, so as I'm almost always doing in these sessions, I want to show you how to define your own shortcuts. You go to Edit, Preferences, or on a Mac, Preferences is in the Application menu, and then Shortcuts, and then in the box, in the search box, you can type step, and you'll see here is toggle note input mode, default step time, and you can click define, hit your shortcut, and press save. So I already did that, so that Control Shift N is my shortcut to switch the note input mode. So right now, if I press Control Shift N, you'll see that icon change. Boom, now it just changed to the step time. Oh, Allison, that's a really kind of a good suggestion for passages like this. Maybe I should try the piano keyboard. You know, I so rarely use that piano keyboard. I'll tell you the times when I use the piano keyboard. I use the piano keyboard if I'm demonstrating on a large whiteboard. So in a lot of classrooms, they have big, giant touchscreen computers called smartboards. Smartboard is actually a brand name, interactive text. I don't even know what the generic name is, but basically a big giant board, a big giant display that's touch sensitive, so that you can interact with the program directly by touching the screen, and a lot of programs are kind of set up for that. MuseScore is not ideally set up to interact just by touching the screen, but the piano keyboard actually works pretty well for it. So I'm going to go back to repitch mode right now and try it. I'm going to go to Control-Shift-I, and I'm going to press P to bring up the piano keyboard, which is unfortunately now hiding behind my music. So I'll move my music. And now I'm going to try to use the piano keyboard and see if I like that better. I want E. Oop, that's the wrong E. Let me undo that and press this E. And then B, C. Hey, I like this. That was a good idea, Allison. Ooh, what's it going to do with the B flat? It gives me a B flat, right? And then I want C, G, B flat. So yeah, maybe if I'm doing repitch mode, that might be another time when I use that piano keyboard. So the one time I normally use it, like I said, is demonstrating on a large screen, a large touch screen, because it doesn't require mousing or keyboard, neither of which are really a thing on those big screens. They're really designed for you to just touch them directly, and the piano keyboard is like the best interface for that. So I am kind of liking this. I'm liking this. That's a good idea. All right, let me just finish that passage then. C, G, A, C, F, A. Oh man, this is great. Man, I love learning things. Now notice when I entered that B, it didn't put the accidental on it, right? Because it's a courtesy accidental. It is a B natural, whether there's a natural sign on it or not, because the bar line canceled the accidental. If I was using computer keyboard to enter that note, I would have given the command to do that. So I think I'm going to undo that and go ahead and do that now. I would type equals to mean natural, and then B, and then get my courtesy accidental that way. I could also, click the toolbar or add the accidental later. Lots of other ways I could add that courtesy accidental. But since I noticed it and wanted to show something, figured I would just do it. Yeah, really nice. Only 2 more measures, and then I'm at the end of that section. D, G, C, D, G. And now I can't even see what I'm typing, but I'm pretty sure I'm getting it right. I am. That's what's really nice about this repitch mode is I won't say it's foolproof, but you just don't have to think as hard as when you're dealing with rhythms also. And now I want that courtesy natural. I wonder if I just press equals and then press the F. Do you think I'm going to get an F to show up, a natural sign to show up? I pressed equals. Now, when you use the piano keyboard, it ignores whatever accidental you might have pre-selected. So I'm going to type equals F. Wait a minute. I said equals F. Equal. Oh. The equal is a toggle button. And so I had previously toggled it on, and then when I pressed equal again, it toggled it off. So that's something to know. If I press equals right now, you'll see the natural sign toggles on, press it again, toggles off, press it again, toggles on, again, off. So I couldn't see whether it was toggled on or off because it was being covered by the music that I'm copying from. All right, so now I'm finally done with repitch mode, right? I'm finally done with repitch mode. So I want to get out of it by pressing Control-Shift-N. Whoa! Oh, Control-Shift-N. My focus was on the web browser. So I got an incognito tab. I use that for testing a lot. So I want to get focused back on MuseScore and press Control-Shift-N, and now my mode changes back to regular note input, and now I can move the cursor into that next bar and type that chord, which is 5, B, down an octave, Shift D. I'm building a chord. Shift and note builds a chord with a keyboard. When you're using the mouse, clicking builds chords. Shift click replaces. When you're using the keyboard, it's the other way around. Why? Because through years of experience and feedback from users, that's how people have said feels the most natural and efficient. So when you're using your keyboard, letter name by itself, I think it's because when you're using your mouse, you can tell it which chord you're trying to add to just by where you click, but when you're using the keyboard, it's always left to right. That's probably something to do with the difference. But anyhow, when you're using the mouse, clicking builds a chord, shift clicking replaces. When you're using a keyboard, use shift to build chords. So now I want shift F. And while I'm at it, let me get that arpeggio in there. The arpeggio symbol is here on the palettes. I think I've got my limited workspace going here so that you can see that right now the arpeggios and glissandi palette isn't added by default. But if I go to add palettes, I'll see arpeggios and glissandi. All I got to do is add that palette. I have a workspace that I normally use where I've already added all my palettes. And now that palette is there. I can open it up and click the arpeggio button, and it adds the arpeggio. So now I feel like I'm done with note input for now, so I'm going to press escape to leave note input mode and kind of assess where I'm at. I've now entered quite a lot of notes in the right hand. All of them, right? For the first 8 measures, anyhow. But let's take a look at the left hand. And the left hand has those ornaments. And those ornaments are like at sort of weird different places, right? Like here's one on the 3rd beat, 1st beat, 3rd beat. But then in the next bar, it's on the 2nd beat, and then a different ornament on the 4th beat, different ornament on the 4th beat. So I'm not going to try to use any special fancy tricks to simplify entry of this. I'm just going to click the notes that I want. So these 3 notes all have the same ornament, right? That D, that G, and that A. So I can click the first one, and then control click or command click on a Mac, the D, command click that A, And then I want the ornaments palette, which also isn't there by default. So I get to add palettes, say ornaments. You would only have to add palettes like the first time you use MuseScore because eventually you will have already added all the palettes. I personally think they should have just added them all, but whatever. That's my opinion. So now that I have an ornaments palette, I can open that and click the ornament I want, which is the Mordant version with the slash through it. This guy here is called short trill. Some people call it inverted mordant, and again, depends on what era you're talking about, which composer you're talking about, and which editor's opinion you're going on. But I'm just going to click mordant, and you'll see it added to all three of those notes at once, which is nice. All right, I think I'm done with that piano keyboard, so I'm going to press P to close that up. On the next line, I've got a mordant, but I've also got two of these other funny things, right? So let's get those notes in there and then worry about it. I'll go to note input mode here, 5 for quarter note, E up an octave, E up an octave, E down an octave. Bass clef is very often going to have to use control up and down because with bass notes, it's very common to have those octave leaps, leaps of a fifth, and so forth. So I'm going to be using control up, control down a lot. Now for the F sharp and G sharp, I will type plus F plus G. And then I'm certainly hoping an A is the next note. Yes, A. And then C, control down, D, E, F, E, D, C. Oh, it's nice. It's going by step. And then G, 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 G. Okay, this next measure is the same as the previous one, so I'm going to wait until I've got the ornaments in, and then I'm just going to copy and paste it. All right, so I press escape to leave note input mode. And let's get some more of those ornaments in there. So I want to get back to that measure 3 here, and I've got a mordant followed by 2 of those funny trills. So the high E here gets the mordant. And then the B gets this version here with the curvy thing going up to it. Now notice it's not as long as that one. And the thing is, again, not an expert on Baroque ornaments, and I don't know if there's a significant difference, but I do see that there's shorter versions here. When I click more, I see these shorter versions. So this guy is listed as up-prawl line. Oh, that's a line because you can extend it over multiple notes, I think. Just like the trill line. These are lines you can extend over multiple notes. That's actually good to know. So let's talk about that briefly. If you want a trill that's like long, you can extend, you can like select a range and then click this guy and you'll see it extends that line over the whole passage. Whether it's multiple notes or maybe a whole note, it'll draw that line long as whatever you've selected. However, I don't want that. I just want this thing to be short, appearing over just that note. So I'm going to use one of these guys. I'll use this one. Now, looking at the original, is this a glitch or no, there really is that little vertical line through it. So I actually don't want that one I just added. Let me undo it. I want the one with the slash in it. Up mordant. Wow. That's what they call it, but that's, I know it's played more like a trill. But whatever, I'm going to not worry about the playback as much as the notation for this. We'll listen to it in a second. But so that's what that one is, and then the one over the G sharp is also got the vertical line, but it's got the downward doohickey. Obviously, I am not the ornament expert. So I want the downward curve, down mordant, right here. All right. So for some reason, this one has a curvy one on it, but this one isn't so curvy. And I don't know if that's a significant difference or it's just the way it is in this font or what, but I'm not going to worry about that. And yes, doohickey is definitely a technical term. So I only got a couple more measures to go to get the first passage done. So let's go ahead and do that. Come on. So I have one of those down doohickeys on the E. So notice how I keep having to click more to get to these things. If I'm doing this a lot, I could say, you know what, I want these ones a lot, so let me just drag them into the palette for easy reuse. And now I don't need the more thing to get at those. You know, I'd have to decide which ones are worth putting there and which ones aren't. But for now, anyhow, I can do that. So anyhow, the E gets the down, or it's actually called the up because it's got the curvy line going up. And then the D gets this guy here that they're just calling short trill. This guy right here. And then on the next system, the top G's both get mordant. So I'll click one, control click the other, and then click mordant. And then I'll click that measure and press R, and it gives me another measure just like it. And then I can press R again to get another measure just like it, because it gives me the G with the mordant. And now I can click that low G, shift right a couple times to select the rest of the measure, and then delete. So that I now have that, just the G with the mordant and the rest of the measure empty. So yeah, these are all kinds of tricks that I use. I'm just going to keep going because this is. I picked this piece in part because it's been on my mind from hearing my wife playing it. Kari does a great job with it. She's got those doohickeys playing well. But what am I trying to say here? I picked it because I knew it would be relatively easy to enter in a MuseScore because it is fairly repetitive rhythmically and all, and it would give me an opportunity to explore those ornaments. But Baroque. The Baroque era and the Classical era theorists will debate endlessly over the difference between doohickey and thingamabob. I don't know, I'm just being silly. But they will argue about mordant and the correct interpretation of a mordant. All right, so what's going on in this measure is the one thing I see in here that I'm a little confused by. And if I were playing editor, I don't think I would let this fly as is. But notice what's happening here. At this point in the piece, let me just expand this a little bit more so we can see more at once. At this point, starting in on beat 3 there, the two hands are working together, alternating notes. And you can see the down stems are meant to indicate the left hand, the up stems meant to indicate the right hand. How do I know that? Well, just because it seems logical. Notice there's no rests on beats 3 and 4 on the top staff. That is my clue that these up stem notes here, which have no legitimate reason to be up stem otherwise, are meant to be played with the right hand, right? So he's using basically cross staff notation here. The lack of the rests is my clue to that, and it is for these two measures, basically that entire line is entered in one staff, and then we're going to move the notes to the other staff. That's how cross-staff notation is going to work in MuseScore, and that's what's going to allow us to have that line be one line and not have to have a whole bunch of invisible rests all over the place to make and breaking. It would be complicated to do that without cross-staff notation. So cross-staff notation is a great feature to know about. The only question is which staff do I enter it on? And I'm going to enter this on the top staff, even though the line starts on the bottom staff. Why? Because by the end of the line, it feels like it belongs on the top staff and it needs to move smoothly into the top staff. So I'm going to enter that entire line onto the top staff, and then I'm going to move the notes down to the lower staff where I need to. There's not one right way to do this, but I think that is how I think is going to work most smoothly for me. So what I'm going to do is go to the top staff, go to Note Input Mode, So on beat 3, I want a 16th rest. So 3, and then for 16th, and then 0 for the rest. And now I want the low G. So I'll type the low G, and now I'm going to use Control Shift down. That moves it to the lower staff. It still lives on the top staff. Notice the bottom staff still has its half rest there, and that position is like blank on the top staff. This note lives on the top staff, but it's visiting the bottom staff, if you want to look at it that way. It's also the wrong octave, so Control down. And now I'm going to type B and do the same Control Shift down. And then F. No, sorry, not F. D. Control Shift down. And then I'm going to type F, Control Shift down, G, Control Shift down, B, Control Shift down, D, Control Shift down. And now I've entered all those notes. And as I said, I could have chosen to do this differently. I could have chosen to put the G, B, and D in the bottom staff and only the F, G, B, and D here, the beat 4 notes on the top staff. Lots of ways you can play this. I find it most convenient to, when you have these passages, just do it all on one staff and then figure out what staff we want them to visit. And we also need to fix stem directions. Like these notes here also had no real business having their stems down, but I'm going to force that. Oh, I forgot to move the rest, apparently. So let me do that. Let me leave note input mode, select the rest, and Control Shift down, and that moves the rest. Notice the half rest is still there, though. So I want to hide that half rest. And right now, it's going to be really hard to select. Can I select it? I was able to select it by zooming in. But if you're ever having trouble selecting a rest because it's being covered by another rest, or same with notes or anything else, select the previous rest and then hit right arrow. And that definitely will select the rest. And now I can press V to make it invisible. And now I can select that G here and press X to flip its stems down. These guys got their stems up automatically because MuseScore knows to treat cross-staff notation specially. So it will aim for the middle of the staff, basically. Aim for the middle of the two staves when using cross-staff notation. So I got that measure in there. Let's see if I can get the next measure in there as well. Again, I'm going to enter it all on the top staff. So I'll go to note input mode again with N, and then type 3 for 16th note, B, Control Shift down. Now, I don't have to do the Control Shift down one at a time. I can select the notes afterwards. So if I had a whole lot of notes in a row that all needed to be moved cross staff, I would just enter them first. In fact, let me just undo that. I'm going to enter the B, and then the G, and then, oops, I got the B already. Now the G, now the B, and now the D, and then the F, G, B, D, B, G, B, D, F, G, whoops, G, B, F. So I now have all of those notes in there. I'll just go ahead and go on. See how I can just go on. C, G, F, E, C, G, E, D, C, F, E, D, B, F, D. I sing the notes as I enter them, in part for your benefit, but in part for my benefit to make sure that I know what I'm doing here and that I recognize if the pitch is wrong. I want to know, did I get the pitch wrong? Did I read it wrong? Did I type it wrong? Or am I singing it wrong because my musical skills aren't as good as I want them to be? And any of those are problems that I want to solve, right? Let's get that there. Width. So I like singing lines while I enter them. It's fun also. So there you go. And now that's supposed to be the end of that system. So I'll go ahead and press enter, except I'll press enter while the focus is in the right window. Enter. So I have those notes entered now, and then all I got to do is get the notes that it wanted to move cross staff. And really, it's just those first four that need to move first cross staff. So I'm going to leave note input mode, press escape, click that first note, shift click that one, and move them all down together with control shift down. Now they're all moved down. Now you also notice there's a few notes that are by themselves stem-wise, right, or beam-wise. And this is also, I think, to indicate the change of hands. This is, he wanted to draw this note stem up to indicate that it's played with the right hand. These notes stem down to indicate they're with the left. This one stem up to indicate it's with the right. Those stem down to indicate they're with the left. So he's using stem direction to kind of convey which hand he wants to use for which. But what I'm going to just do is select those two notes that I want to stand alone. I want that B to stand alone, and I want that B to stand alone. So I click one, control click the next, and now come over to the properties panel, click the beam tab, and click this guy that says no beam. And then those notes get no beam. So now I'm comparing, and that B here, I want to flip it stem up, so I'll press X, and everything else has already got the stem direction that I want. So I'm kind of good there. Yeah, I'm flying through this piece. Hey, I haven't saved it yet. Someone should have told me to save this thing, right? Because how often do I get myself into trouble with not saving things during these demonstrations? So give me a moment. I'm going to save it because I want to. So Control S to save it. And as I'm constantly observing, so I still need to. I think like next week I'm going to do my cafe on organizing your folders, perhaps, because I need to reorganize them because I don't have an outside shore folder in my main scores folder, and I need to. But I'm going to go ahead and put this under MuseScore Café and save. Oh no, that's for my theme music. That's for something different. So I don't have a folder. So I'm just going to create a folder right now. Control E is the shortcut on my system to create a new folder. At least I thought it was. Maybe not when you're on a Linux app, I think. I'll click the button, click the icon there to say I want a new folder called Outside Shore Music. And I'm just going to save in here and then worry about organizing organizing later. So Frank just said that there's still some stems off, and I'll check that out in a moment. But let me save this first. Thought I got the am I not saving this? Come on. Save. There we go. Stem's still not right. Let's see. Oh, this guy here is supposed to be down. After that, and this guy's supposed to be up. Yep, you're absolutely right. Still, I was a little too quick about, I noticed some that needed to be changed, but didn't notice the rest that needed to be changed. So now I got it. All right, so now that I've saved it, let's get to the next little aspect here, which is this octave G. So I'll go here, N for note input mode, 7 for whole note, G, and then Shift G to enter another G, except I forgot. Let me undo that. Control down to get the low G. And now Shift G, because building chords always works bottom to top. And it's going to tie to a bunch more Gs, right? It ties to a bunch more Gs. And notice some of those ties are dotted. So I'm going to have to deal with that in a minute. And I'll have time to. I'll be able to get, a good amount here done here. So I've got that going. I want to just type T. Since 7, I already have whole note selected. I just have to type T. I have to get my focus back in MuseScore, type T, and it gladly repeats that chord and ties it. And so that's measure 12. Hit T again. There's measure 13. T again, 14. T again, 15. T again, 16. T again, 17. And now 7, the low C. So I got all my G's in there, all tied. So what's the deal with those dotted ties? Well, this is an Urtext edition, so I'm going to assume that this is the way Bach wrote it. And Bach's not an idiot. Well, he didn't play the modern pianoforte, and he certainly didn't play a Yamaha P125 digital piano, right? So the thing is, if I play that G, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, it sustains, but after a couple measures, you can't hear that G anymore, right? It starts to die. So you can't really sustain a G for that. You can't sustain anything on a piano for that long and expect it to still be heard. Bach's not an idiot. He knows that. And again, the instrument he wrote for, claviers and harpsichords and so forth, wouldn't they would sustain even less. On the other hand, he also wrote a lot for organ, and that was really his main instrument to play. And on organ, you can sustain indefinitely. So I think he was hedging here on what kind of keyboard instrument it would be played on, thinking, well, if you play this on organ, you can just sustain that G forever. But if you're playing it on a clavier or something else, a clavier, you probably need to restrike that G every once in a while. So what he did is made some of those ties dotted to indicate that, yeah, maybe you don't want to do that to literally tie it if the sound's dying on you. So I'm going to click that tie, come over to the properties panel, and click the dotted icon. And now it's a dotted tie. Then there's only 2 measures on that line, so I'll go ahead and hit enter. And only 2 measures on the next line. Hit enter. And both of those ties, in both 14 and 15, are dotted. So I'll click one, control click the other if I can, and make them both dotted. There we go. And then bars 16, 17, and 18, and then that's the end of the piece. So I'm going to show you a command I almost never show. Actually, let me save it first. If you go to Tools and say remove empty trailing measures, it gets rid of all those extra measures. Because when I created this score, I just went with the default, which was 32 measures. I didn't bother counting because I know I can add or delete them later. But now that I've written all the way to the end of the piece, remove empty trailing measures just figures out which measures are empty at the end of the piece and gets rid of them. It won't get rid of empty measures anywhere else in the piece, only at the end. So, yeah, that's all good. There's a couple formatting things I want to take care of before we go away. One is those last 3 measures. Notice MuseScore is not stretching them across the page because it doesn't have to, but it doesn't look very good. Now, as soon as I enter 8th notes, this isn't going to be a problem, right? 16th. As soon as I enter all those 16th notes, MuseScore is going to stretch it out for me. However, just so you know, if you ever do have a situation like this where you have like 3 whole notes at the end of your last line and you definitely want only those 3 whole notes there, like if it's a coda, but you want it to stretch out, what we're going to do is go to Format, Style, Page, and here we are going to, let me just close that for a second, change this last system fill threshold. This says stretch it if it's more than 30% full. Right now it's not more than 30% full, so it's not stretching it. If I definitely want it to stretch, I'm just going to turn that threshold down to 0. When I turn that threshold down to 0, now it's more than 0% full. I will happily stretch it for you. So by making that threshold 0, you're forcing it to stretch always. So that's one formatting change I want to make. But the other one is, by default, MuseScore is trying to put as much as it can onto the first page, and then there's only 2 systems left over. Well, this isn't good. Now, you might look at this, and a lot of people look at this and say the problem is there's too much space between the systems on the second page. I want to dissuade you from thinking in those terms. This is just not how it should look to begin with. Yes, there's ways of closing up that space, but no, that's the wrong solution. We shouldn't have a score with 6 systems on one page and only 2 on the next. It should be 4 and 4, or something more reasonable. Does the original go 4 and 4? Or does it go something else? Because I think the original does something different because it's got like all that empty space at the top of the page to be really silly. So they did their bit of silliness to get around that, putting a bunch of empty space on the first page. And this is part of a collection, and so maybe they want to do that. I think that's going to look crazy. So I'm going to select after that 4th system and hit Control-Enter to make it a page break. And now I have 4 systems per page, which is going to look better. Yes, it's still a lot of space there that doesn't need to be there, and I can tweak parameters to get maybe just to force more of the space between, within the systems instead of between the systems. In fact, let me show you that just real quick. Last thing I'll show you here. I'm going to go to Format, Style, and because I never play with this setting. But this guy here, factor for distance between systems, this controls how hard MuseScore tries to add space between systems versus within systems. And I forget what it means, but I think if I go with a lower value, no, if I go with higher values, yeah, I forget how it works. But anyhow, you can play with the settings in here to get it to do that, or you can just say, you know what, because I can see that I can get away with a lot more space between my staves, I'm just going to increase the min staff distance and say I just want there to always be more space between staves. Except that doesn't work for grand staves, I forget. So anyhow, forget what I'm doing here. I would need to think a little harder about the best way to fiddle with the formatting on this. We'll deal with that some other time. But we've talked about so much stuff here. By the way, Richard, I just saw your question there. Sorry, I missed it before. Is it possible to have MuseScore open on 2 laptops, one score on one screen? Well, certainly you can have as many laptops open as you want, but they won't talk to each other in any way. But yeah, you can have as many laptops open with MuseScore as you want. And registration with email has nothing to do with using MuseScore. MuseScore doesn't need a registration. If you want to access scores from MuseScore.com, that's your business, but that has nothing to do with actually running MuseScore. All right. We covered a lot of different things, and I entered quite a lot of music. Often in these things, I only get like 2 measures done because there's so much detail. But here, there was so much like, oh, it's more of the same, and it was a lot of repetitive things, and I got to enter a lot of music, and yet still cover a lot of different topics. So hopefully this was useful to people. And yeah, next week I will either talk about file organization, but I'll tell you what. I'm thinking of starting a new monthly series. Like my 3rd Wednesday is the score of the month. I want to have a beginner session. I think I'm going to make it the 2nd Wednesday, though. 2nd Wednesday of the month will probably be for beginners specifically. And we'll deal with basics. And we'll just because there's always new beginners, right? So maybe I'll do it every month. Maybe I'll alternate it. I don't know. We'll talk through how that's going to work. I'll think about it. But in any case, next week I will be back with something. Tomorrow, Music Masterclass, we'll be looking at some of the music that you all have been submitting. And then you're going to start hearing me talk a lot about counterpoint, because that's what we're going to be dealing with starting next month is the counterpoint course. So, hope you had a good time here, and I will see you next time. Later.